February 71,497, Florence, night falls, and cold air settles over the Piazza della Signoria. Yet tonight, Europe's most brilliant city holds no lantern light, no music, none of the laughter heard during past carnivals. In their place rises a raging fire. Flames illuminate the dome of Florence Cathedral, and countless faces seized with fervor. Young men rush toward the pyre, hurling their belongings into the blaze. A painting of a beautiful woman, chests filled with costly cosmetics, a deck of cards, symbols of gambling and indulgence, ornate wigs, sheet music for secular tunes, books of love poetry, mirrors, sculptures, even precious musical instruments, objects that once stood for wealth, taste, and the glory of the Renaissance, fading away little by little in the roaring fire. The crowd chants prayers aloud, monks sing sacred hymns. The flames climb higher and higher. This is no celebration. It is a judgment. It would be remembered as the bonfire of the Vanities. For centuries, Florence stood as Europe's center of thought, art, and wealth. Great artists were born here. Countless treasures of classical civilization were preserved here. People of this city believed beauty could bring them closer to God. But now, Florence was destroying everything it had created with its own hands. What force drove the heart of the Renaissance to turn against the Renaissance itself? The answer lies with one man, a monk clad in black robes, who would change Florence's fate forever. His name, Girolamo Savonarola. The year 1492, Lorenzo de' Medici, ruler of Florence, drew near the end of his life. Once, he was known as Lorenzo the Magnificent. Banker, statesman, the greatest patron of the arts. Under his support, Florence became the beating heart of the Renaissance. Artists including Michelangelo and Botticelli received funding from the Medici family. Yet cracks spread beneath all this splendor. The Medici banks began to crumble. The family's fortune shrank steadily. Ordinary folk on the streets felt no gratitude for the palaces they built or the art they collected. To them, this aristocratic clan had controlled the city for decades. A ruler who behaved more and more like a monarch. They called Lorenzo a tyrant. Lorenzo was 43 years old, sickness tormented his body. The man who once held Florence's political fate in his hands now lay in bed, waiting for death. In his final days, a man who had long criticized him came to visit, Savonarola. Later legends claimed he stood beside Lorenzo's deathbed and cursed the Medici leader, declaring his soul would descend into hell. But history offers no proof the scene ever took place. The truth is far quieter. Savonarola simply paid a visit. No dramatic argument. No final reckoning. No showdown between lifelong enemies. And yet, after this calm farewell, Florence began to transform. For Lorenzo was dead, and Savonarola remained alive. Savonarola was not born into poverty. His family came from Ferrara. His grandfather was a respected physician. In his youth, he planned to follow the medical profession. But as he grew older, he grew disgusted with the world as he saw it. He believed Europe rotted from within. Nobles drowned in wealth, the church overflowed with greed. People chased fine clothes, feasts, music and desire, while forgetting their souls. Eventually, he joined the Dominican order as a monk. But ordinary monastic life could not satisfy him. He began traveling to preach. His voice burned with anger. He warned the end of days drew near. He declared the church had fallen into corruption. He insisted Florence must repent. Many thought him mad, yet more and more people chose to follow him. In an age of vast inequality, endless war and corrupt clergy, people longed for someone to explain why their world was falling apart. Lorenzo himself allowed Savonarola to enter Florence. He even helped him become a monk at the monastery of San Marco. It is a bitter irony, the Medici supported the man who would ultimately bring down their rule. Savonarola began delivering speeches across the city. He condemned lavish lifestyles. He denounced the nobility. He attacked secular elements in art. He proclaimed, Florence worships false idols. They pour endless wealth into palaces while the poor starve. They collect works of ancient Greece and Rome, yet abandon true faith. They paint images of the Virgin Mary, dressing her in silks as rich as any noblewoman. He never spoke the name of the Medici family directly, but everyone understood. His target was the world they had built. Still, Lorenzo did not stop him. Perhaps because Savonarola attacked the Pope and church corruption even more fiercely. Perhaps Lorenzo believed a fanatical monk could never shift politics. He was wrong. In 1492, Lorenzo died, his son Piero inherited power. But Piero lacked his father's political skill. Discontent exploded across Florence. Meanwhile, Savonarola's followers multiplied, they became known as weepers. They wandered the streets, spreading the monk's ideas. Savonarola began to proclaim, a great king from the north would soon arrive. He would punish the corrupt, he would reform the church. Then, something that seemed miraculous unfolded. In 1494, King Charles VIII of France led his army over the Alps and marched into Italy. He claimed the right to the throne of Naples. To his believers, this was prophecy fulfilled. In truth, many had long known France planned an invasion. But in that era, facts carried little weight. What mattered was that people believed. Faced with the French army, Piero chose submission. He surrendered vital territory, hoping to secure peace. This decision enraged Florence completely. November 1494. An uprising swept the city. The Medici family was driven out. The clan that had ruled Florence for nearly a century fled the city. On paper, the Republic was restored. But the figure holding real influence was no longer the council. It was Savonarola. After French troops occupied Florence, the city needed someone to negotiate with Charles VIII. That task fell to Savonarola. Against expectations, he succeeded. The French army withdrew, Florence won temporary freedom. Savonarola declared, "This city shall become the New Jerusalem. It will lead all of Italy in religious reform." He set about remaking Florence. The structure of government was reshaped. Ordinary craftsmen gained greater political voice. Power held by nobles and bankers was weakened. At the same time, the city grew increasingly rigid. Revealing clothing was banned, gambling was outlawed. Every act he deemed immoral was forbidden. His followers formed patrols that roamed the streets, inspecting women's dress. They measured the height of necklines, they checked the length of hemlines. Florence transformed from a city that pursued beauty into one obsessed with purity. At first, Pope Alexander VI chose tolerance. Though Savonarola criticized the Vatican, he could still serve as a political tool. But when Florence refused to join an anti-French alliance, the Pope lost patience. He ordered Savonarola to stop preaching, and summoned him to Rome. Savonarola fell silent for a time, yet he still controlled the city. A strange cycle took shape. Once, the Medici ruled Florence from behind the scenes. Now, the man who opposed the Medici became the new shadow ruler. He fought against old power, only to build power of his own. He held the first bonfire of the Vanities. Florentines tossed everything they saw as sinful into the flames. Artworks, books, luxury goods, all objects that symbolized desire. As the fire burned, Savonarola believed he was purifying the city. But doubts began to grow in many minds. If a man seeks to save the world by destroying its finest treasures, is he saving it or destroying it? The Pope finally struck. Alexander VI issued a decree. Savonarola was excommunicated from the church. Still, he refused to stop. He even held a second bonfire of the Vanities. Yet Florence grew weary. People had once tired of Medici extravagance. Now they grew tired of Savonarola's austerity. The city no longer trusted every word he spoke. To win back support, he announced he could prove divine miracles. A Franciscan friar accepted his challenge. They agreed to hold an ordeal by fire. Both men would walk through flames to see whom God would protect. The year 1498 Florentines gathered in the square. They waited for a miracle, waited for an answer. Hours slipped by, the two sides argued endlessly over the rules. How large should the fire be? How far must they walk into it? How long should they remain within the flames? Mid-debate, storm clouds burst open. Heavy rain poured down. The fire was extinguished. The crowd fell quiet. Many took this as proof God had rejected Savonarola. An angry mob marched toward the monastery of San Marco. Savonarola was arrested. His trial began. Under torture, he confessed his prophecies sprang from imagination. Then he withdrew his confession. In the end, he was convicted of heresy. Years earlier, he had stood in the Piazza della Signoria, watching art made by others consumed by fire. Now, he stood on that very same ground, May 231,498. Savonarola and two of his closest followers were brought to the square. They were stripped of their monk's robes, hanged. Their bodies were then thrown into the fire. The flames once reserved for vanities now consumed the man who created those bonfires. Centuries have passed. Florence still stands. The dome of Florence Cathedral still shines. Michelangelo's works are admired across the world. Savonarola left a question that haunts history to this day. When an age sinks into corruption, people search for someone to change it. But when that reformer comes to believe he holds absolute truth, does he become the very thing he once fought against? The fire of 1497 burned far more than mirrors, paintings and books. It burned a city's faith in itself. At the peak of the Renaissance, Florence once believed, human beings can create beauty. Savonarola believed, human beings must destroy themselves first to gain salvation. In the end, the flames died away, but that question lingers in history. Should we fear the decay of the world, or those who claim they alone can save it?